any law that uplifts human personality is just. The teachers have oppressed the students. And so, in my opinion, they're guilty of degrading the personality of our children. But nobody talks about the loss from these children as they now struggle in an economic system that they're not prepared for. And so it's problematic for me when we continue to say it is race, when we know that APS was an all-black school system, but it was all black because Beverly Hall decided that's what she wanted in her particular, especially in her executive leadership team. It was all black. And so at what point does this idea about human vice come into play? I think the time for the teachers to stand up and say there's something wrong with the system is not after you cheated, but when the initial standards came down. And so that's why I have a problem that the teachers did not say something when the initial standards came down that they knew were unattainable and unreachable, but yet they chose to cheat in a system that said no excuses. No excuses for children living in poverty, no excuses for drug infested areas, but those educators knew that those students were not ready, but yet they decided to cheat.
I'm, again, not differing with you, and let me just go on record and say that based on both sides of the situation, I certainly hear the argument from Reverend Burnett and from both of you as well, that there are a lot of infractions in this situation. There are persons and parties being hurt on all sides, especially the children. So let's step outside of that particular argument, if you will, for a moment, because I think we all agree there are some issues as it relates to race, there are issues as it relates to class, there are issues as it relates to the way that children are dealt with, there are issues as it relates to just the hierarchical structure of this environment. But doesn't this construct kind of come down to a summary of retributive justice in some way? Are we looking at an environment where the system of criminal justice is based on punishment of the offenders rather than addressing the rehabilitative needs of the entire system? I'll take that response from anyone.
Well, I think there, as far as you summarizing the whole thing, going back to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., something does need to be done. Something must be done. Because going back to root cause analysis, first and foremost, in this United States of America, something has to be done by us as Black people still being treated as outsiders in our own country. Starting on, we talk about Superintendent Beverly Hall. Yes, she forgot this. She forgot that she only had authority within the confines of APS as she and Sonny Perdue went into their power struggle. She forgot this as she was defending, standing up to him and not allowing him to disrespect her, so she thought. She forgot all of these things. And we forget, as Black people, that we are still treated as outsiders. And that's the whole thing, being treated as outsiders, and we are not, we don't know the rules. We're still trying to figure out. We're still trying to figure out the rules on how can we belong in a society.
Let me push back a little bit. You continue to talk about Beverly Hall as if she was an outsider, but as I continue to read through the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I found where she was in dialogue and community with business, the Atlanta Commerce, Chamber of Commerce. So she wasn't outside. Beverly Hall was inside, even so much so, she created the Atlanta Educational Fund, which was an entity where they poured money in from the gates, from personal donation, from businesses, to turn around the city of Atlanta schools. Now, what was problematic, I don't think she forgot, because like I said, she was very connected. And so you had a lot of the big players particularly, who were big players who decided that they were gonna partner with her, okay? So she wasn't outside, she was inside, and she knew, hold on, she knew the rules of the game. However, she still decided that she was going to cheat to change the school.
Just now, I think it's also important to note that these scandals have existed and have been prevalent all over the country. Louisiana, Washington D.C.,
New York, Baltimore, Texas.
And it is also important to note that in all of these scenarios where there are populations of predominantly black students, and there were often overriding administrators who were Caucasian or of another ethnicity, the outcome was very different. So I think that we can lend to, at least in that scenario, that race has a significant role in this. But then if that is the case, then, so what happens at this juncture? What can one say as it relates to the community mending this grievance? And can we just put it into the category of being an issue of class or race, that the administrators have to deal with this, the educational system has to deal with this? What do we as a community have to do to address this? Because to your point a moment ago, you said that this was something that everyone was clearly aware of. So if everyone's clearly aware of it, and there have been all these impacts, the governor didn't go to jail.
No.
You know, that there are so many people who didn't go to jail, and they're aware of this, and they're aware of CRCT and all the constructs that exist. And this money that's been handed down that has not actually impacted positively on the whole, these school systems. So when that happens, and we know that all these variables are in place, what finds us feuding amongst each other and deliberating about whether or not it's race, whether or not it's the children? Is it a much larger picture? And does that picture mean that we have to find much bigger remedy?
Yeah, I agree that we do, and I think that is the elimination of these standardized testing nationwide.
Yeah, and just for a moment, just a step back. I think the thing that made Atlanta so egregious was the fact that these schools, every school, if they hit their target, every person in the school received a $2,000 bonus. Now, when you looked at the cheating across the nation, there was no other place that was giving people $2,000 bonus.
Now, I don't have the facts on how much, but I do know that in some instances in Atlanta, I thought that there were lesser amounts than $2,000. In fact, I'm pretty certain of that.
There was some, however, majority of schools, Parks Middle School, for instance, everyone who hit target, which was above the APS. Now, keep in mind, Beverly Hall set a score above even the APS standard. They got $2,000 every time they hit those targets. It creates an atmosphere of cheating. So whether it's George Bush's No Child Left Behind, or whether it's our very own Obama's Race to the Top, you cannot pay people and think that they're going to change the educational system.
I would actually agree with you very much on that. You can't pay people and change the educational system. One of the things that Thomas Aquinas said was, because of the diverse conditions of humans, it happens that some acts are virtuous to some people as appropriate and suitable to them, while the same acts are immoral for others as inappropriate to them. That, you know, unfortunately, as we're sitting here, we're having this discussion, you know, we find one argument and very differing opinions about what is moral and immoral in the midst of this construct. Ultimately, what I'm hearing everyone say is that overhaul is necessary. And overhaul is necessary, I think, only if there is a consensus that everyone would actually move together, and that consensus cannot just involve educators, it cannot just involve parents, it cannot involve just the business community. It has to go exactly from the top to the bottom, and we have to address these issues and really get down systemically to what the problems are, because in reality, education in this country was formulated so that those, well, the educational infrastructure has always been in place for elite whites in this country. It has always been in place. And as it relates to immigrants and others who come into the country, that the educational structure was put in place so that we were functional, not so that we would excel.
Right, correct.
And so here we are in this situation, ironically, many, many years later, and we're still trying to figure out why the system does not function so that we excel. It was never designed so that we excel. I'll take some closing comments from each of you if we can briefly.